The gunshot echoed through the pine forest as Willow Michaels stumbled over twisted roots, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The small bundle pressed against her chest whimpered, and she clutched her 2-month-old daughter tighter, ducking beneath low-hanging branches. Behind her, the shouts of men grew louder, and the flickering light of their torches danced through the trees. It was June 1876, and Willow was certain she would die tonight in these woods outside Beaver, Utah. "Hush now, Eliza," she whispered, pressing her lips against the infant's forehead. "We must be quiet." Her dress was torn at the hem, her feet bleeding inside worn boots. 3 days on the run had left her exhausted and terrified. The bounty hunters wouldn't stop until they found her, until they took her back to her husband. Or worse, until they carried out his orders if they deemed returning her too troublesome. The crack of a twig behind her sent Willow plunging forward, no longer caring about the noise she made. Survival was all that mattered now. She burst through the tree line into a small clearing, the moonlight bathing the open space in silver. Her heart sank. There was nowhere to hide. Another gunshot rang out, closer this time. Willow sobbed, turning in desperate circles, searching for an escape route. The baby began to wail, sensing her mother's terror. The sound of hoofbeats approached from the opposite direction. A rider. Willow froze, trapped between her pursuers and this new threat. A tall figure on horseback emerged from the shadows, the brim of his hat pulled low. In the moonlight, she could make out a weathered face, serious eyes scanning the clearing before settling on her trembling form. "Please," Willow begged, backing away. "Please don't hurt us." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the ground. He approached slowly, hands raised to show they were empty. "You're running from something," he said, his voice low and calm. His eyes moved to the bundle in her arms, then back to her face. Behind them, the shouts grew louder. The man's expression hardened as he glanced toward the forest. "How many are after you?" he asked. "4. Maybe 5 men," Willow stammered. "My husband sent them." Without hesitation, the stranger moved toward her, reaching out a steady hand. "Come with me now, madam, quickly." Willow hesitated, clutching her baby tighter. "I mean you no harm," he said. "But those men will be here any second." The baby's cries grew louder, and Willow knew she had no choice. She placed her hand in his, feeling calloused fingers close gently around hers. "I'm Yates Forrester," he said, leading her to his horse. "You're both safe now." He helped her mount, then swung up behind her. With one arm around her waist, he turned the horse away from the approaching voices and urged it forward into a gallop. Willow clung to the saddle horn with one hand, her baby secured with the other. The stranger Yates was solid and warm at her back. She didn't know if she could trust him, but for now, she was moving away from danger instead of toward it. They rode hard for nearly an hour before Yates slowed the horse to a walk. They had entered a narrow canyon, the walls rising steep on either side. "There's a cabin up ahead," he explained, his breath warm against her ear. "My cabin. We'll be safe there for the night." Willow nodded, too exhausted to speak. The baby had finally quieted, lulled to sleep by the rhythm of the horse's gait. True to his word, a small log cabin soon appeared, nestled against the canyon wall. A corral stood empty beside it. Yates dismounted first, then reached up to help Willow down. Her legs trembled beneath her, threatening to give way after days of running. "Easy now," Yates murmured, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. He led her inside, lighting a lamp that cast a warm glow over the simple interior. A wooden table and chairs sat near a small stove. A bed was pushed against one wall, a trunk at its foot. "It's not much," he said, sounding almost apologetic, "but it's dry and warm." "It's perfect," Willow whispered, the first words she'd spoken since they'd fled the clearing. Yates nodded, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. You should rest. I'll take care of the horse and keep watch. They'll keep looking, Willow said, fear returning. They won't stop. They won't find you here, Yates replied with quiet confidence. Few people know about this place. It's where I come when I need to disappear for a while. He moved to the stove, stoking a fire and setting a kettle to boil. Willow sank into a chair, her baby still sleeping in her arms. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. You have a name, madam? Yates asked, his back to her as he worked. Willow, she answered. Willow Michaels, and this is Eliza. Pretty names, he commented, turning to face her. In the better light, she could see him clearly now. He was older than she'd first thought, perhaps 30 to her 23 years. His face was tanned and weathered, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' worth of beard. His eyes were a deep blue, crinkled at the corners from years in the sun. Thank you, she said softly, for helping us. Yates nodded, removing his hat and running a hand through dark hair streaked with the occasional strand of gray. Any decent man would have done the same. You'd be surprised, Willow replied, a bitter edge to her voice. He studied her for a long moment. Your husband, is he the father of your child? Willow looked down at Eliza's peaceful face. No, she answered. He's not. Yates asked no more questions that night. He fed her a simple meal of beans and coffee, then insisted she take the bed while he sat by the door, rifle across his lap. Despite her fear and exhaustion, it took Willow a long time to fall asleep, her mind racing with questions about the stranger who had saved her life. When morning came, Willow woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Eliza was fussing beside her, hungry and in need of changing. For a moment, panic seized her as she tried to remember where she was, but then the events of the previous night came flooding back. She was in a cabin with a man she didn't know, miles from anywhere. Yates was at the stove, his back to her. He must have heard her stir, for he spoke without turning. There's clean water in that basin if you need it. Food's almost ready. Thank you, Willow said, lifting Eliza and moving to the basin. She quickly attended to her daughter's needs, grateful for the privacy Yates afforded her by keeping his back turned. When she returned to the table, he set a plate of bacon and beans before her, along with a steaming cup of coffee. I rode out at first light, he said, taking a seat across from her. Checked the area. No sign of those men, but they could still be searching. We should stay put for today at least. Willow nodded, balancing Eliza in one arm while she ate with the other. She was ravenous, having had little more than hard bread and water for days. You've been running a while, Yates observed, watching her eat. 3 days, she confirmed between bites. From Cedar City, my husband. He's an important man there, has connections. What's his name? Yates asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Willow hesitated. Harold Blackburn. He owns the bank and half the businesses in town. Yates nodded slowly. I've heard of him, never met the man. Consider yourself fortunate, Willow said bitterly, and the child's father. Willow looked down at Eliza, now quiet in her arms. Dead, killed in a mining accident before she was born. He never even knew I was expecting. Yates was silent for a moment. I'm sorry. We weren't married, Willow continued, her voice low. William and I. We loved each other, but my father had already arranged my marriage to Harold. When William died, I had no choice but to go through with it. And your husband didn't take kindly to raising another man's child, Yates guessed. He doesn't know she's not his, Willow explained. At least, he didn't until recently. I married him 6 months ago, and Eliza was born 2 months past. I claimed she came early, and he seemed to believe me at first. What changed? Willow's hand trembled as she set down her coffee cup. His sister. She's a midwife. She took one look at Eliza and knew she wasn't premature. She told Harold and she broke off, unable to continue. He threatened you, Yates finished for her. Or the child, Willow nodded, tears filling her eyes. He said he wouldn't raise a whore's bastard. That he'd send her to an orphanage back east or worse. I couldn't let that happen, so I ran. Yates's expression darkened. You did the right thing. Did I? Willow asked, her voice breaking. I have no money, no place to go. The men he sent after me, they're bounty hunters. They won't stop looking. They will if they can't find you, Yates said firmly. We'll stay here a few days, then move on. I know people in Colorado who can help. Willow looked at him in surprise. You would do that? Take us all the way to Colorado? I would, he confirmed. I have business there anyway, and I can't in good conscience leave you and your daughter to fend for yourselves. Why? Willow asked, studying his face. Why help us? You don't even know me. A shadow passed over Yates's features. Let's just say I understand what it's like to need help and not receive it. I won't be that person, the one who turns away. Something in his tone told Willow not to press further. Instead, she simply nodded. Thank you. They fell into a routine over the next few days. Yates hunted and checked the perimeter of the canyon regularly, while Willow kept the cabin in order and cared for Eliza. They spoke little at first, both cautious in their own way. But slowly, as the immediate fear of discovery faded, they began to talk more freely. Willow learned that Yates had been a cavalry officer during the war, and now worked as a scout and occasional bounty hunter himself, only for men who deserve it, he assured her. He had no family, having lost his parents young and never married. Never found the right woman. Willow asked one evening as they sat outside the cabin, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls red and gold. Yates smiled faintly. Found her once, lost her to fever before we could marry. I'm sorry, Willow said softly. He shrugged, but she could see the old pain in his eyes. It was many years ago now. Is that why you live out here alone? Partly, he admitted. I got used to my own company, and people tend to complicate things. Like we're complicating your life now, Willow said, looking down at Eliza sleeping in her arms. Some complications are worth it, Yates replied, his eyes meeting hers briefly before returning to the sunset. On their 5th day at the cabin, Yates returned from hunting with a grim expression. Riders, he said tersely. 3 of them about 5 miles south. Moving slow like they're tracking. Willow's heart raced. The bounty hunters, can't be sure, Yates replied, already moving around the cabin gathering supplies. But we can't take chances. We leave at nightfall. They packed quickly, taking only what they could carry on horseback. Yates had acquired a 2nd horse, borrowed, he called it, from a rancher he knew for Willow to ride. As darkness fell, they set out, traveling north through the canyon and into the mountains beyond. Yates led them along game trails and narrow passes, avoiding the main roads. They rode through the night, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses or feed Eliza. By dawn, they had put considerable distance between themselves and the cabin. Yates found a sheltered spot near a stream, hidden by thick pines, where they could rest during daylight hours. We'll travel at night for a while, he explained as Willow settled against a tree trunk, Eliza nursing at her breast. Less chance of being spotted that way. How far to Colorado? She asked, exhaustion evident in her voice. 10 days, maybe 2 weeks at this pace, Yates replied, unsaddling the horses. Depends on how careful we need to be. Willow nodded, trying to hide her dismay. 2 more weeks of running, of sleeping in the wilderness, of fearing every sound might be their pursuers. Yates must have read her expression, for he came to sit beside her, his voice gentle. I know it's hard, especially with the little one, but we'll make it, Willow. I promise you that. She looked up at him, struck by the quiet determination in his face. "I believe you," she said, and was surprised to discover that she truly did. Their journey continued in this fashion for several days, traveling by night, resting by day in hidden places. They skirted settlements when possible, though occasionally Yates would venture into a small town to purchase supplies, leaving Willow and Eliza hidden in the wilderness. It was during one of these separations, as Willow waited anxiously for Yates's return, that she first admitted to herself how much she had come to depend on him, not just for protection and guidance, but for companionship. In the quiet hours of their travels, they had shared stories, hopes, even laughter. She had learned to read his expressions, to understand the meanings behind his sparse words, and something else had grown between them, something Willow was almost afraid to acknowledge, even to herself. Yates returned from the town with food, ammunition, and news. "There's a poster," he said grimly, unpacking his saddlebags, "offering a reward for information about a woman traveling with an infant. Doesn't name you, but the description is clear enough." Willow's hands trembled as she took the folded paper he offered. There, in stark black print, was a crude sketch that might have been her face, and a description of a young woman with a 2-month-old baby girl. The reward was substantial, $500. "He won't give up," she whispered. "Men like that rarely do," Yates agreed. "But there's something else. The poster doesn't mention bounty hunters. It claims you stole money from your husband before fleeing a considerable sum and that the child is his, kidnapped by her unstable mother." Willow's head snapped up. "That's a lie." "I took nothing but Eliza and the clothes on my back." "I know," Yates said calmly, "but it changes things. He's not just trying to bring you back now, he's trying to have you arrested. Theft and kidnapping are serious charges." Tears of anger and frustration filled Willow's eyes. "He's making it impossible for me to ever stop running." Yates was quiet for a moment, considering. "Not necessarily," he finally said. "If we can prove the child isn't his, the kidnapping charge falls apart, and without evidence of theft, that charge won't stand either." "How do I prove Eliza isn't his?" Willow asked helplessly. "It's my word against his, and he's a respected businessman while I'm just a—" "Don't," Yates interrupted sharply. "Don't say it. You're not what he's making you out to be." He sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "There must be people who knew about you and William. Friends, family members who could testify." Willow shook her head slowly. "William's family moved away after he died. And my family. My father arranged my marriage to Harold. He wouldn't help me now." "What about the midwife who delivered Eliza?" Yates suggested. "Would she be willing to state that the baby wasn't premature?" "Harold's sister was the midwife," Willow reminded him. "She's the one who told him the truth in the first place." Yates frowned, thinking. "There has to be a way," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Some evidence, some witness." Willow's eyes widened suddenly. "Letters," she said. "William wrote to me regularly before we began meeting in secret. I kept them all. They're hidden in a loose floorboard in my father's house." "Those letters could help establish your relationship with William," Yates nodded, "but we'd need to retrieve them." "We can't go back to Cedar City," Willow protested. "It's too dangerous." "Not for both of us," Yates agreed. "But I could go. One man traveling alone wouldn't attract attention." "No," Willow grabbed his arm. "Harold's men would recognize you if they saw you in the clearing that night, and my father's house is across from the bank. Harold would see you." Yates covered her hand with his. "We'll figure something out. For now, let's keep moving. Colorado is still our best option." They traveled on, pushing deeper into the wilderness. As they crossed from Utah into Colorado territory, the landscape changed, becoming more rugged, the mountains higher and more densely forested. Game was plentiful, and Yates proved skilled at hunting, ensuring they never went hungry. Eliza thrived despite the difficult circumstances, growing stronger each day. Willow watched with pride and relief as her daughter's cheeks filled out, her blue eyes so like William's, bright and curious about the world around her. And then, just as they were beginning to believe they might have outpaced their pursuers, disaster struck. They had stopped at a stream to water the horses when the sound of approaching riders echoed through the trees. Yates reacted instantly, helping Willow onto her horse before mounting his own. "Ride," he commanded, pointing toward a dense thicket of pines. "Hide there. I'll lead them away." "Yates, no," Willow began, but he cut her off. "Do as I say," he insisted. "I'll find you after." "Go." With Eliza secured against her chest, Willow urged her horse forward, heading for the shelter of the trees. Behind her, she heard Yates riding in the opposite direction, making far more noise than necessary, deliberately drawing attention. She reached the pines and dismounted, leading her horse deeper into the thicket until they were well hidden from view. Through gaps in the branches, she could see 4 riders emerge from the trees on the far side of the stream. They paused, then turned to follow Yates's obvious trail. Hours passed. Willow remained hidden, fear growing with each passing minute. Eliza began to fuss, hungry and uncomfortable, but Willow dared not move from their hiding place. As night fell, she strained to hear any sound that might indicate Yates's return. Nothing. By midnight, she was frantic with worry. Yates should have returned by now if he'd successfully led the bounty hunters away. His continued absence could only mean he'd been captured or worse. Dawn broke, gray and misty. Willow had not slept, her eyes red from tears and watching. She couldn't stay hidden forever. Eliza needed proper food and care, and their supplies were running low. She had to make a decision: continue to wait, or press on alone. The sound of a single horse approaching made the decision for her. Willow held her breath, one hand over Eliza's mouth to keep her quiet, the other reaching for the small revolver Yates had given her weeks before. "Willow." Yates's voice, low and strained, called from beyond the trees. "Willow, are you there?" She nearly cried out in relief, but caution held her back. "How do I know it's really you?" she called softly. A pause, then. "You have a small birthmark shaped like a crescent moon just below your right ear. You told me your mother said it meant you were blessed by the night sky." Tears sprang to Willow's eyes. It was Yates. No one else could know that detail she'd shared during one of their quiet conversations. She led her horse out of the thicket and found him waiting, slumped in his saddle. "Yates," she gasped, seeing the bloodstain spreading across his shirt. "You're hurt." "It's not as bad as it looks," he grimaced, sliding from his horse with effort. "Bullet grazed my side. Lost them about 10 miles back, but I circled around to be sure before returning." Willow helped him to a fallen log, then retrieved their medical supplies. "We need to clean and bandage this," she said, her hands already working to remove his shirt. The wound was indeed a graze, but deep enough to need stitching. Yates sat stoically as Willow cleaned and sewed the gash closed, his only reaction an occasional sharp intake of breath. "You're good at that," he commented as she tied off the last stitch. "My mother was a healer," Willow explained, wrapping a clean bandage around his torso. "She taught me." "Your hands are steady," Yates observed, watching her work. "Mine would be shaking." "Only on the outside," Willow replied with a small smile. "Inside, I'm trembling." Yates caught her hand as she finished securing the bandage. "I'm sorry I worried you," he said softly, "but I couldn't let them find you and Eliza." Willow looked up, meeting his gaze. I was afraid you might be dead." "It would take more than a few bounty hunters to kill me," Yates assured her, his voice light but his eyes serious. "I made you a promise, Willow. I intend to keep it." Something shifted between them in that moment, a barrier falling away. Without thinking, Willow leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. Yates went still for a heartbeat. Then his hand came up to cup her cheek, returning the kiss with gentle pressure. When they parted, both seemed surprised by what had happened. Willow's cheeks flushed and she busied herself packing away the medical supplies. "We should rest," she said, not meeting his eyes. "You've lost blood and we both need sleep." Yates nodded, his expression unreadable. "A few hours," he agreed. "Then we need to move on. Those men aren't far behind." They made camp there, hidden within the pines. Yates insisted on taking first watch despite his injury, and Willow was too exhausted to argue. She curled up with Eliza, falling into an uneasy sleep filled with dreams of pursuit and loss. When she woke, the afternoon sun was filtering through the branches overhead. Yates sat nearby, cleaning his rifle. He looked up as she stirred. "Feel better?" he asked. "Yes," Willow replied, sitting up carefully to avoid waking Eliza. "How's your wound?" "Sore, but I'll manage," he said, setting the rifle aside. "We should reach Silver Creek in 3 days if we keep a steady pace. I have friends there who can help us." "What kind of friends?" Willow asked, curious. Yates rarely spoke of his past or the people in it. "Good ones," he replied with a half-smile. "A man named Joseph Parker and his wife, Sarah. Joe was with me in the cavalry. He's the sheriff in Silver Creek now." "A sheriff," Willow repeated, hope rising in her chest. Would he help us legally, against Harold's claims?" "If anyone can, it's Joe," Yates nodded. "He's got connections with judges all through the territory, and he owes me a favor or two." They set out again as evening approached, traveling through the night. Yates was quieter than usual, and Willow sensed he was thinking about the kiss they'd shared. She was thinking about it too, wondering if she'd been too forward, if she'd misread the growing connection between them. On the second night of travel, they made camp in a sheltered hollow. Yates had shot a rabbit, and the smell of it cooking over their small fire made Willow's mouth water. Eliza was already asleep, bundled in the sling Willow had fashioned from a spare blanket. "You should eat," Yates said, offering her a portion of the meat. "Keep up your strength." Willow accepted it gratefully. They ate in companionable silence for a while before she gathered her courage to speak. "About what happened yesterday," she began. "The kiss, I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable." Yates looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "You didn't," he assured her. "If anything, I was worried I'd taken advantage of your vulnerable state." Willow shook her head firmly. "You didn't." I've been wanting to do that for some time." A slow smile spread across Yates's face. "Have you now?" "Don't tease," Willow admonished, but she was smiling too. "I'm trying to be honest here." "So am I," Yates replied, his smile fading into something more serious. "Willow, these past weeks, getting to know you and Eliza, it's meant more to me than I can say." "It's meant a lot to me too," she admitted softly. "But," Yates continued, and Willow's heart sank at the word, "I need to be sure you know what you're doing. You're running from a bad situation, and I'm the one who happened to be there to help. I don't want your gratitude to be confused with other feelings." Willow considered his words carefully. "At first, maybe it was gratitude," she acknowledged, "but it's been more than that for a while now. I see who you are, Yates, your kindness, your strength, your integrity. Those are the things I'm drawn to." Yates studied her face as if searching for any sign of uncertainty. "And you should know," he said slowly, "that I'm not a wealthy man. I don't have lands or a fine house to offer you. Just myself. That's all I want," Willow replied simply. "A good man who will care for me and love my daughter." Yates reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "I already do," he said quietly. "Care for you both, I mean." It might not have been a declaration of love, but to Willow, it meant everything. She squeezed his hand, warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time since fleeing Cedar City, She allowed herself to imagine a real future, not just survival. Their journey continued the next day, and the day after that. The terrain grew more difficult as they approached Silver Creek, forcing them to travel more slowly than Yates would have liked. His wound was healing well, but it clearly pained him, though he never complained. On the morning they expected to reach Silver Creek, they paused on a ridgeline overlooking a valley. Below them, a small town spread out along a rushing creek, surrounded by pine forests and distant mountains. "Silver Creek," Yates announced, pointing. "We'll be there by midday." Willow couldn't help the nervous flutter in her stomach. After weeks in the wilderness, the prospect of returning to civilization was both appealing and frightening. "Do you think we'll be safe there?" "Safe as anywhere," Yates replied. "Joe runs a tight town. No bounty hunter would dare cause trouble under his watch." They descended into the valley, following a winding trail that eventually joined a proper road. As they approached the town, Willow grew increasingly self-conscious about her appearance. Her dress was travel-stained and torn in places, her hair tangled despite her best efforts to keep it neat. Yates seemed to sense her discomfort. "The Parkers won't judge," he assured her. "Sarah's got a kind heart, and she'll be thrilled to have another woman to talk to. Their place is just on the edge of town. We'll go there first before anyone sees us." True to his word, Yates led them past the first few buildings of Silver Creek to a tidy cabin set back from the road. Smoke curled from the chimney, and flowers bloomed in boxes beneath the windows. A woman emerged at the sound of their approach, tall and slender, with graying auburn hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. She shaded her eyes against the midday sun, then her face broke into a wide smile. "Yates Forrester, as I live and breathe," she called, hurrying toward them. "Joe said you might be passing through, but we didn't expect you for another week at least." Yates dismounted, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his wound. "Hello, Sarah," he greeted her warmly. "We made good time despite a few complications." Sarah's eyes moved to Willow, still seated on her horse with Eliza in her arms. Her expression shifted from surprise to understanding in an instant. "I see you've brought company," she said, her tone welcoming. "Come down, dear. You must be exhausted from your travels." Willow slid from the saddle with Yates's assistance. "This is Willow Michaels," he introduced her, "and her daughter, Eliza, there, under my protection." Something in his tone must have conveyed the gravity of the situation, for Sarah nodded seriously before her smile returned. "Then they're under ours as well," she declared. "Come inside, both of you. I've stew on the stove and fresh bread just out of the oven." The interior of the Parker home was everything Willow had dreamed of during those cold nights in the wilderness: warm, clean, and comfortable. Sarah bustled about, setting out food and heating water for baths, all while cooing over Eliza and asking gentle questions about their journey. By the time Sheriff Joseph Parker returned home in the late afternoon, Willow had bathed, changed into a borrowed dress of Sarah's, and was sitting by the fire with a freshly bathed and fed Eliza sleeping in a makeshift cradle. Joe Parker was a big man with a booming voice that he quickly lowered upon seeing the sleeping infant. He greeted Yates with a crushing handshake and a slap on the back that made the scout wince. "Wounded again?" Joe asked, raising an eyebrow. "You always did find trouble, Forrester." "Or it finds me," Yates replied with a wry smile. The men retreated to the porch with coffee and cigars, while Willow remained inside with Sarah. Through the open window, she could hear snippets of their conversation, Yates explaining their situation, Joe asking pointed questions about Harold Blackburn and his bounty hunters. "You poor dear," Sarah said, drawing Willow's attention back inside. "What a terrible ordeal you've been through." "Yates made it bearable," Willow replied honestly. I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't found us that night." Sarah studied her face for a moment, a knowing look in her eyes. "He's a good man," she said. "The best I know, aside from my Joe. And I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Willow felt heat rise to her cheeks. "We've grown close during our journey." "I can see that," Sarah smiled, "and I'm glad. Yates has been alone too long." The men returned inside, their expressions serious. Joe pulled up a chair across from Willow. "Yates has explained your situation," he began, his tone gentle despite his imposing presence. "I want you to know that you and your daughter are safe here. No bounty hunter will trouble you in my town." "Thank you," Willow said, relief washing over her. "That said," Joe continued, "we need to address the legal issues. These charges of theft and kidnapping, they're serious. Even if they're false, they give your husband legal grounds to pursue you." "What can we do?" Willow asked, glancing at Yates. "First," Joe said, "we document everything. Your marriage to Blackburn, your relationship with the child's true father, the threats made against you and the baby. I'll take your formal statement tomorrow." "And then?" Yates asked from where he leaned against the doorframe. "Then I telegraph the territorial judge," Joe explained. "Judge Wilson is a fair man. He'll want to hear all sides, but he won't stand for a man using the law to persecute an innocent woman and child." "What about the bounty hunters?" Willow asked, fear creeping back into her voice. "They won't be a problem," Joe assured her. "I'll post deputies at the town entrances. Anyone asking about a woman and baby will be directed to my office, and I'll make sure they understand that false charges don't hold water in Silver Creek." It sounded too good to be true after weeks of terror and flight. "And Harold?" Willow pressed. "What if he comes himself?" Joe and Yates exchanged a look. "Let him come," Joe said firmly. "He'll find that money and influence don't count for much here." That night, Sarah insisted that Willow take their spare bedroom while Yates would sleep in the small bunkhouse behind the main cabin. As Willow settled Eliza into a proper cradle borrowed from a neighbor, Sarah lingered in the doorway. "I meant what I said earlier," she said softly. "About Yates. That man has carried a burden of loneliness for many years. It does my heart good to see how he is with you and the baby." "He's been our guardian angel," Willow replied, touching Eliza's cheek gently. "I don't know how I can ever repay him." Sarah smiled knowingly. "I don't think repayment is what he's looking for," she said. "Just be patient with him. He might need time to believe he deserves happiness again." The next morning, Willow gave her formal statement to Sheriff Parker, recounting everything from her arranged marriage to her flight from Cedar City. Joe wrote it all down meticulously, asking clarifying questions but never doubting her account. "I wish I had proof," Willow sighed when they had finished. "The letters from William would help, but they're still hidden in my father's house." "Your testimony is compelling," Joe assured her. "And if it comes to it, I believe we can find witnesses who knew of your relationship with William." Mining towns have long memories. Yates had been quiet throughout the process, but now he spoke up. "What about the midwife, Harold's sister? Would she testify about the baby not being premature if pressured legally?" Joe considered this. "Possibly. Family loyalty is strong, but lying under oath is a serious matter. We could petition the judge to subpoena her testimony." A week passed in relative peace. Willow and Eliza settled into life at the Parker home, with Willow helping Sarah with household tasks to repay their kindness. Yates came and went, sometimes disappearing for a day at a time on errands he didn't explain. On one such evening when he had been gone since morning, Willow sat on the porch after putting Eliza to bed, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart quicken, but it was only Yates returning. He dismounted, looking tired but satisfied as he joined her on the porch. "Where have you been all day?" Willow asked, noting the dust on his clothes and the weariness in his stance. "Scouting," he replied, settling beside her on the bench. "Heard rumors of riders asking questions in the next town over. Wanted to see for myself." Anxiety gripped Willow's throat. "Bounty hunters, 3 men," Yates confirmed, "but they're not coming any closer. Joe sent word to them that their wanted poster doesn't hold water here. They seem to get the message." "For now," Willow said, unable to shake her fear. Yates took her hand, his touch reassuring. "Willow, look at me," he said gently. "We're making progress. Joe heard back from Judge Wilson. He's coming through Silver Creek next week and has agreed to hear your case." Hope warred with doubt in Willow's heart. "And if he rules against me, he won't," Yates said with quiet confidence. "But even if things don't go as planned legally, I want you to know something." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I meant what I said before. I care for you and Eliza. Whatever happens, you won't face it alone." Willow studied his face in the fading light. "What are you saying, Yates?" He met her gaze steadily. "I'm saying that if you wanted, if you felt the same way, there could be a future for us, together." Joy blossomed in Willow's chest, but caution held it in check. "As what? Travelers? Fugitives?" "As a family," Yates replied simply. "I have land north of here, a small ranch I've been working on for years. It's nothing grand, but it's mine, free and clear. It could be ours." Tears sprang to Willow's eyes. "You would do that? Take us in permanently?" "It's not taking you in," Yates corrected, his voice rough with emotion. "It's choosing a life together, if that's what you want." Willow didn't hesitate. She leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in answer. Yates's arms came around her, drawing her close as he returned the kiss with a passion that left no doubt about his feelings. When they parted, Willow rested her forehead against his. "Yes," she whispered. "That's what I want." The days leading up to Judge Wilson's arrival passed in a blur of preparation and nervous anticipation. Joe helped Willow refine her testimony, while Sarah ensured she had proper clothes for the hearing. Yates alternated between scouting the surrounding area for signs of trouble and spending quiet moments with Willow and Eliza, the 3 of them gradually becoming more comfortable in their new dynamic as a family unit. Judge Wilson arrived on a Tuesday, a distinguished man with silver hair and shrewd eyes. He set up court in the town hall, scheduling Willow's hearing for the following morning. "He's fair but strict," Joe warned as they walked home from meeting the judge. "Stick to the facts, answer his questions directly, and all should go well." That night, Willow barely slept, rehearsing her testimony in her mind and imagining all the ways things could go wrong. What if Harold himself appeared? What if the judge didn't believe her? What if he ordered Eliza returned to Cedar City? Morning came too quickly. Willow dressed in the simple but respectable dress Sarah had altered for her, and Yates escorted her to the town hall, Eliza bundled in her arms. The baby had grown noticeably in their weeks of travel, her face filling out, her expressions more animated. Looking at her now, no one could mistake her for a premature infant. The hearing was less formal than Willow had feared. Judge Wilson sat at a table at the front of the hall, with Joe beside him in his capacity as sheriff. Willow sat opposite them, Yates at her side, while a small crowd of townspeople, mostly friends of the Parkers, gathered to watch the proceedings. Judge Wilson began by reviewing the charges alleged in the wanted poster, then asked Willow to tell her story. With a deep breath, she recounted everything: her relationship with William, her father's arrangement with Harold Blackburn, her marriage and Eliza's birth, and finally, the discovery and threats that had forced her to flee. The judge listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When she finished, he asked several pointed questions about the timeline, pressing for details about Harold's specific threats and her actions after leaving Cedar City. "And you took no money or valuables belonging to Mr. Blackburn when you left?" the judge asked, his expression neutral. "None, Your Honor," Willow affirmed. "Only what was mine before our marriage, my mother's locket, some personal items, and clothes for myself and the baby." The judge nodded, then turned to Yates. "Mr. Forrester, you've been traveling with Mrs. Michaels for some weeks now. Has she ever given you reason to doubt her account?" "No, Your Honor," Yates replied firmly. "Everything she said matches what I've observed. The bounty hunters pursuing her were armed and dangerous, not men looking to recover stolen property, but men intent on capture at any cost." Judge Wilson made another note, then addressed Sheriff Parker. "Joe, you've known Mr. Forrester a long time. You vouch for his character without reservation," Joe answered promptly. "Yates Forrester is the most honest man I know. If he says Mrs. Michaels is telling the truth, you can bank on it." The judge considered this, then turned back to Willow. "Mrs. Michaels, I must address one more matter. You claim the child is not Mr. Blackburn's, but rather the daughter of a deceased minor named William. Have you any proof of this relationship?" Willow's heart sank. "Only my word, Your Honor, and the baby herself. Anyone who knew William would see the resemblance. She has his eyes, his features." Judge Wilson studied Eliza thoughtfully. "I see. And this William, what was his full name?" "William Evans," Willow replied. "He worked the Sundown mine outside Cedar City." An unexpected voice spoke from the back of the hall. "I knew William Evans, Your Honor." All heads turned as a man stood up, tall and weathered, with the unmistakable look of a miner about him. "And you are?" the judge inquired. "Daniel Collins, sir. I worked the Sundown with Will Evans for 2 years before the collapse that killed him. Came to Silver Creek afterward for a fresh start." Judge Wilson gestured him forward. "You knew the deceased well, then?" "Like a brother," Collins confirmed, approaching the front. He glanced at Willow with a nod of recognition before turning back to the judge. "I knew about him and Miss Willow, too. Will talked about her all the time, showed me the letters she wrote him. He was heartbroken when her father arranged her marriage to Blackburn." Willow stared at the miner, struggling to place him. She had visited William at the mining camp several times, but always briefly and in secret. "And did Mr. Evans know about the child before he died?" the judge pressed. Collins shook his head. "No, sir. The collapse happened before that, but—" He paused, looking at Eliza. "May I?" Willow hesitantly turned Eliza to face the miner. Collins studied the baby's face, then nodded firmly. "That's Will's child, no question," he stated. "Got his eyes and the shape of his face. Anyone who knew him would see it plain as day." A murmur ran through the assembled townspeople. Judge Wilson called for silence, then spoke directly to Collins. "Would you be willing to provide a sworn affidavit to that effect, Mr. Collins?" "Yes, sir," Collins replied without hesitation. "Will Evans was my friend. I won't let his child be taken by a man who had no part in making her." The judge nodded, seemingly satisfied. He turned back to Willow. "Mrs. Michaels, one final question. What is it you want from this hearing?" Willow took a deep breath, glancing briefly at Yates before answering. "I want freedom, Your Honor. Freedom from Harold Blackburn's claims, freedom to raise my daughter in peace, freedom to build a new life." Judge Wilson considered her words, then began writing. The room was silent as his pen scratched across paper. Finally, he looked up. "Based on the testimony presented, I find no evidence supporting the charges of theft or kidnapping," he announced. "The wanted poster issued by Harold Blackburn is hereby declared invalid within this jurisdiction, and I will send notice to that effect to the authorities in Cedar City." Relief flooded through Willow, but the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he continued, "I am issuing a preliminary ruling that Eliza Evans, not Blackburn, is the natural daughter of William Evans, deceased, and Willow Michaels. Mr. Blackburn has no paternal rights to the child. Tears of joy filled Willow's eyes. Beside her, Yates squeezed her hand supportively. As to the matter of your marriage, the judge added, his tone softening slightly, that is more complicated. Under normal circumstances, a formal divorce proceeding would be required. However, given Mr. Blackburn's threats against you and the child, I am prepared to consider extraordinary measures. He paused, looking directly at Willow. I will issue a protective order preventing Harold Blackburn from approaching or contacting you or the child. Should he violate this order, he will face arrest and imprisonment. In the meantime, I suggest you consult with a lawyer regarding formal dissolution of the marriage. It was more than Willow had dared hope for. Thank you, Your Honor, she whispered, voice thick with emotion. The judge nodded, then addressed the room at large. This hearing is concluded. Sheriff Parker, please see that copies of my rulings are properly filed and distributed. As the crowd dispersed, Daniel Collins approached Willow and Yates. Miss Willow, he said, removing his hat. I'm sorry we didn't properly meet back in Cedar City. We'll talked about you so much, I feel like I know you. Thank you for speaking up, Willow said gratefully. I didn't know William had friends in Silver Creek. Just arrived last month myself, Collins explained. Was passing through the Parker's place for a meal when Sarah mentioned a young woman with a baby who might be from Cedar City. Got curious, thought I'd come see for myself. He smiled down at Eliza. She really does have his eyes. Would you tell me about him sometime? Willow asked hesitantly. About your friendship. I'd like Eliza to know about her father as she grows up. Be my honor, madam, Collins replied sincerely. Will Evans was one of the best men I ever knew. His daughter deserves to hear all the good stories. Outside the town hall, the afternoon sun warmed the boardwalk as Willow, Yates, and the Parkers made their way back to the house. Willow felt lighter than she had in months, the constant fear finally lifting from her shoulders. What happens now? She asked Yates as they walked slightly behind the others. Now, he replied, his voice warm, we start that life we talked about, if you're still willing. Willow shifted Eliza to one arm so she could take his hand. More than willing, she assured him. Though I'd like to know more about this ranch of yours. Yates smiled, the most unguarded expression she'd seen from him. It's about 2 days' ride north of here, he explained. 100 acres of good land with a stream running through it. Cabin needs some work, but it's solid. Been adding to it whenever I could over the years. Planning for a family, Willow teased gently, hoping, Yates admitted, without really believing it would happen. He squeezed her hand. Until now. That evening, as they sat around the Parkers' table celebrating the judge's ruling, Joe raised his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, he said, smiling at Willow and Yates, and to justice done right. To family, Sarah added, her eyes warm as she looked at baby Eliza sleeping peacefully in a basket nearby. To finding what you didn't know you were looking for, Yates said quietly, his gaze fixed on Willow. She raised her own glass, heart full. To safety and love, she replied. And to the good people who make both possible. 2 days later, they prepared to depart for Yates's ranch. The Parkers had loaded them with supplies, and the townspeople, now fully invested in their story, had contributed gifts. A proper cradle for Eliza, kitchenware, blankets, and other necessities for starting their new life. As they mounted their horses, Eliza securely fastened in a special carrier Yates had crafted for her, Sheriff Parker approached with a final piece of news. Just got word from Cedar City, he said, his expression serious but satisfied. Harold Blackburn received the judge's ruling. He's not happy, but his own lawyer has advised him to let the matter drop. Seems the banker has other legal troubles brewing, something about misappropriation of funds. He can't afford the scandal of pursuing you now. Relief washed over Willow. So it's really over. As far as the law is concerned, Joe confirmed. But stay alert all the same. Men like that don't always follow legal advice. Yates nodded grimly. We'll be careful, he promised. Sarah embraced Willow warmly. You come back and visit, she insisted. I want to see this little one grow up. We will, Willow promised, tears in her eyes. I can never thank you enough for everything you've done. Nonsense, Sarah replied briskly, though her own eyes were damp. It's what decent folks do. With final goodbyes exchanged, they set off, following the road north out of Silver Creek. The day was clear and warm, the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. Willow rode beside Yates, Eliza cooing happily in her carrier, fascinated by the motion and the passing scenery. Are you nervous? Yates asked as they left the last buildings of town behind. About the ranch, I mean. Willow considered the question. A little, she admitted. It's been a long time since I had a real home, but mostly I'm hopeful. Yates smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. So am I, he said, more than I can remember being. They traveled at an easy pace, stopping frequently for Eliza's needs and to rest the horses. By nightfall of the first day, they had made good progress, camping near a small lake where trout jumped in the twilight. As they sat by the fire after dinner, Eliza asleep in her basket, Yates reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small bundle wrapped in cloth. I've been meaning to give you this, he said, handing it to Willow. Wasn't sure when the right time would be. Curious, Willow unwrapped the bundle to find a leather-bound journal and a small wooden box. She opened the box first, gasping softly at what lay inside, a simple gold ring with a small pearl set in the center. It was my mother's, Yates explained, watching her reaction carefully. One of the few things I have of hers. It's beautiful, Willow whispered, touching it gently. The journal was hers too, Yates continued. She wrote down recipes, home remedies, advice for keeping a house and raising children. I thought you might like to have it. Willow looked up at him, understanding the significance of the gift. These weren't just heirlooms. They were his history, his most treasured possessions. Yates, she began, emotion thickening her voice. I can't take these. You can, he insisted gently. They should be used, not sitting in my saddlebag. And he paused, seeming to gather his courage. And I'd like you to have the ring as a promise. When your divorce is final, if you're willing, I'd like to make it official. You, me, and Eliza. A real family. Tears spilled down Willow's cheeks. Are you asking me to marry you, Yates Forrester? I am, he confirmed, his own eyes suspiciously bright in the firelight. Not right away, I know you need time. But someday, when you're ready. Willow closed the box carefully and set it aside with the journal before moving to kneel beside him. She took his face in her hands, memorizing every line and angle. I don't need time, she said softly. I know what I want, who I want. It's you, Yates. It has been since that night in the forest when you said we'd be safe. His arms came around her, pulling her close. You were so brave, he murmured against her hair. Standing there with your baby, ready to fight the whole world to protect her. And you were my miracle, Willow replied. My answer when I'd run out of hope. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other as the fire crackled and the stars emerged overhead. When they finally parted, Willow picked up the ring box again. Yes, she said simply. Whenever the time is right, my answer is yes. They reached the ranch late the following afternoon. As they crested a ridge, Yates reined in his horse, gesturing at the valley below. There it is, he said, a note of pride in his voice. Forrester Ranch. Willow followed his gaze, taking in the scene before her. A log cabin stood near a creek, smoke rising from its chimney, a surprise that made Yates frown slightly. A corral and small barn stood nearby, and beyond them, meadows stretched toward distant pine forests. It was beautiful in its simplicity, exactly the kind of place Willow had dreamed of during those dark days in Cedar City. "Someone's there," Yates observed, his hand moving instinctively to the rifle in his saddle holster. "Stay behind me." They approached cautiously, but before they reached the cabin, the door opened and an elderly man stepped out, shading his eyes against the sun. "About time you showed up, Forrester," he called. "Was beginning to think you'd forgotten about the place." Yates relaxed visibly. "Thomas," he greeted, dismounting. "Didn't expect to find you here." "Got your message from Joe Parker," the old man replied, approaching. "Said you'd be bringing family home and needed the place ready." His curious gaze moved to Willow and Eliza. These must be the ladies in question. "Thomas Miller, my nearest neighbor and friend," Yates introduced, helping Willow down from her horse. "Thomas, this is Willow Michaels and her daughter, Eliza." "Pleasure to meet you both," Thomas said, tipping his hat. "Been airing out the cabin and stocking the pantry. Sarah Parker sent a list of what you might need." His eyes twinkled. "That woman thinks of everything." "She certainly does," Willow agreed, already feeling welcome by this extension of kindness. Come in," Thomas urged. "Got stew on the stove and fresh bread." "You must be tired from the trail." The cabin was larger than it had appeared from a distance, a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, and 2 small bedrooms off to one side. Everything was simple but clean, with new curtains at the windows and fresh linens on the beds. A rocking chair sat by the fire, and above the mantel hung a painting of mountains that reminded Willow of the view from the ridge. "It's wonderful," she breathed, turning to Yates. "Truly." His expression softened at her approval. "It needs work," he said. "Been planning to add another room, extend the porch." "We'll make it perfect together," Willow assured him. Thomas stayed for dinner, entertaining them with stories of the area and its inhabitants before taking his leave. "My place is just over that first rise," he explained as he departed. "Holler if you need anything, and welcome to the neighborhood, Mrs. Michaels." As the door closed behind him, Willow and Yates looked at each other in the quiet cabin, Eliza sleeping peacefully in her new cradle. This was it, the beginning of their life together. "Are you happy?" Yates asked softly, coming to stand beside her at the window. Willow leaned against him, feeling his arm come around her shoulders. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she answered honestly. "This feels right, Yates, like we were meant to find each other." "I think we were," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Welcome home, Willow." The months that followed were busy ones as they settled into life at the ranch. Yates worked on improvements to the cabin, adding a 3rd bedroom and expanding the porch as he'd planned. Willow established a vegetable garden and learned to manage the household with help from Yates's mother's journal. Eliza thrived in their new home, growing stronger each day. By autumn, she was sitting up on her own, laughing at Yates's silly faces and reaching for Willow whenever she entered the room. The bond between Yates and the baby grew stronger too. He would sing to her as he rocked her to sleep, tell her stories about the animals on the ranch, carry her with him on short walks around the property. Word came from Silver Creek that Judge Wilson had granted Willow's divorce petition, citing abandonment and threats against her safety. Harold Blackburn, embroiled in financial scandal, had not contested it. Willow was legally free. The following spring, on a perfect May morning, Willow Michaels became Willow Forrester in a simple ceremony at their ranch. Sheriff Parker and his wife traveled from Silver Creek for the occasion, along with Daniel Collins and a handful of neighbors who had become friends over the passing months. Sarah Parker had helped Willow sew a new dress of pale blue cotton, and Thomas Miller had carved a set of wooden rings as a wedding gift. Eliza, now crawling and beginning to pull herself up to stand, watched the proceedings from Sarah's lap, occasionally calling out in her baby language as if offering her own approval. "I take you, Willow, to be my wife," Yates said, his voice steady as he placed his mother's pearl ring on her finger alongside the wooden one. "To love and protect for all the days of our life together." "I take you, Yates, to be my husband," Willow responded, sliding the matching wooden ring onto his finger. "To love and stand beside for all the days of our life together." Sheriff Parker, authorized to perform the ceremony, pronounced them husband and wife with evident satisfaction. As Yates leaned down to kiss his bride, a cheer went up from the assembled guests. That night, after the celebration had ended and their guests had departed, Yates and Willow stood on their porch, looking out at the stars. Eliza was asleep in her crib, exhausted from all the excitement. "Mrs. Forrester," Yates said, testing the name with a smile, "has a nice ring to it." "It does indeed, Mr. Forrester," Willow agreed, leaning into his embrace. "Though I'm not sure it's fully sunk in yet." "We have a lifetime for that," Yates assured her, his arms tightening around her waist. "A lifetime of days and nights together." Willow turned in his arms to face him. "Did you ever imagine that night in the forest that we would end up here?" Yates considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "Not specifically," he admitted. "But there was something about you standing there with your baby in your arms, terrified but ready to fight, that made me want to know you, to help you, to be worthy of your trust." "You've been all that and more," Willow said softly. "My protector, my friend, my love." "And you," Yates replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, "have given me what I never thought I'd have again. A family. A home that's more than just a place to sleep." They sealed these truths with a kiss, standing together under the vast starry sky, the future stretching before them like the endless western horizon, full of promise, adventure, and love. 2 years later, on a warm summer evening, Willow sat on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching Yates chase a laughing Eliza across the yard. At 3 years old, Eliza was a spirited child with her mother's golden hair and her biological father's blue eyes. She adored Yates, following him everywhere and insisting on helping with his chores around the ranch. The sound of their laughter was joined by another, softer sound from the bundle in Willow's arms. She looked down at her 6-month-old son, James Thomas Forrester, named for Yates's father and their good friend and neighbor. The baby boy had his father's dark hair and serious expression, though it frequently gave way to a gummy smile that could melt the hardest heart. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains gold and purple, Yates scooped up Eliza and carried her back to the porch, the child giggling as she hung upside down over his shoulder. "I believe this belongs to you, madam," he said with mock seriousness, setting Eliza upright before his wife. "Indeed it does, sir," Willow played along, smoothing Eliza's tousled hair. "And what am I to do with such a wild thing? Love her, I suppose," Yates suggested, sitting beside them and reaching to touch James's cheek. "As we do." Eliza climbed onto his lap, her small hands framing his face. "Story time, Papa," she asked hopefully. "After supper," Yates promised. "The one about the brave mama and her baby girl who were rescued by a handsome cowboy." "Yes." Eliza clapped her hands. "That one," Willow exchanged a smile with her husband. It was Eliza's favorite story, a carefully edited version of how they had met, with all the frightening parts removed and a healthy dose of adventure added. Someday, when she was older, they would tell her the full truth. As they moved inside for supper, Willow paused in the doorway, looking back at the peaceful ranch bathed in the day's last light. From desperate flight to perfect contentment, a journey she could scarcely have imagined that terrifying night when she'd fled into the forest with her newborn daughter. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked. Coming to stand beside her, Willow leaned against him, their son cradled between them, their daughter already setting the table inside with determined concentration. "I'm thinking about what you said that night," she replied softly. "When I was so afraid and you found us in the clearing." Yates smiled, remembering. "You're both safe now," he quoted himself. "We are," Willow agreed, turning to look up at him. "Safer and happier than I ever dreamed possible." "And I intend to keep you that way," Yates promised, bending to kiss her gently. "For all our days together." Hand in hand, they went inside to join their daughter, closing the door on the gathering dusk and embracing the warmth of the home and family they had built together, a family forged in desperate circumstances, but strengthened by love, courage, and the enduring promise of safety found in each other's arms.